Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Horowitz, president of TCS Education System. TCS is a unique nonprofit company which he founded in 2009 that empowers higher ed institutions to advance student success and community impact. The story behind TCS is an interesting one. As the Great Recession hit in the late 2000s, Dr. Horowitz anticipated that schools would struggle to stay open in the years ahead due to inflated overhead costs and stagnant delivery models, and he created a community model that could provide not just stability, but sustained growth, one in which universities collaborate instead of compete, gain resources, share expertise, and optimize expenditures in the process. Dr. Horowitz joins us today to talk about how TCS has changed its business model a little bit to bring on board a health system and its first college, an osteopathic medicine school. What makes this very interesting to me is how they're creating doctors for the future using artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and other technologies, and how these technologies can be used to improve education delivery in higher education. Michael, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here, Drumm. Thank you.
Well, it's our pleasure. And, it's great because your institution, TCS Education System, was in the news recently about a new, I don't want to call it an acquisition, but you have a new partner.
We have a new college and university at TCS Education System. It's actually a couple of years with us since 2019. The big news, and it's literally front page, full page today in the Wichita Business Journal, is our Kansas Health Science Center and its connected Kansas College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Well, that is neat. That's exactly what we're going to talk today, is because this is different from what you guys have done in the past, the incubation and everything else. But just so that listeners, tell us about TCS Education System, your philosophy behind it, and what you actually do with your partner schools.
TCS Education System, we're integrated, we're nonprofit, and we're a system that works collaboratively across all of our colleges and our system office. And here's what we get done. We create a platform for institutional sustainability and growth, and we have a laser focus on student success and community impact. So those are table stakes for institutions that want to be part of our system. Now, with Kansas Health Science Center, we now have 5 colleges and universities across the United States. And what I want to tell you, Drumm, is those 5 colleges have students in all 50 states, because for the beginning of TCS, since the beginning, we have put emphasis on online technology. Most of our students remain on ground, but there's great capacity. So even as we've entered Kansas with a brand new medical school, we already have students that are studying in hybrid format in Kansas. In terms of philosophy, it's radical cooperation, which I think is breaking the mold in higher ed. Higher ed is about competing and worrying about, picking out my turf. And we have brought a radical philosophy to higher ed, which is colleges will do better by working together, all in, integrated. And I'm happy to say that since we started in 2009, the 4 colleges that have students today, they've effectively doubled in size, each and every one of them. So the model is working. And as you know, we've now taken on one of our biggest projects to date, the launch of a brand new medical school and health sciences university. We're also 100% nonprofit. We can get into that if we want to. I think that's a part of our secret sauce.
I think you're absolutely right. It is part of the secret sauce. What I'm really impressed with TCS is you run the back end stuff, and I know I'm being real simplistic about this, but you're running the back end stuff to allow the institutions to focus on educational delivery. Is that a simplistic way to sum it up?
Yeah, I'll agree with you that it's simplistic, and it's somewhat accurate, because we've evolved, right? We're learning and growing with each iteration. So, my original vision didn't have anything to do with back end anything. It was bring colleges together, create a comprehensive model, including governance. We're going to thrive together. What we quickly figured out is there's so much better done at scale and collaboratively. So you're absolutely right that a lot of it is the back end stuff. Some of it now is the student facing stuff, such as student finance. It's better if you have a deep team of student finance professionals. Some of them are behind the scenes. Some of them are talking to students day to day. So you're right in the sense that at the system office, we don't have faculty and we don't have most of the student-facing personnel, but it's evolved past, we're hidden in the background. And there's a super high measure, I'm proud to say at this point, of academic collaboration. Once a year, we have 100 faculty from all 5 colleges assembled. This last year it was on Zoom, and they're making hay, and they're not the people who are behind the scenes. They are the front facing, and they're learning from each other, and they're executing shared classes and joint programs and international projects. So your simplistic answer was spot on. Kind of going back a few years, we've evolved past that.
Well, it sounds like, as you describe it, Michael, it sounds to me like you are a CSU system who is not part of the state. You're offering many of those same sort of things that institutions need.
That I like that one better. I'll tell you why. I think we are at the moment entirely unique, being nonprofit private, and I've never worked in a public like a CSU. It's kind of how I envision it, though, right? So we don't have campuses. We have distinct colleges and universities. Yes, we are an integrated system. We have a head of the system. That's me. We have a system board. We have a board of trustees for each of the colleges. So I think as we chase after the nearest fit, that might be better than just saying, yeah, they're just the back end men and women.
Well, thank you very much for correcting me. I appreciate it. I always like getting smarter on things.
I do too, yeah.
So, Kansas Health Science Center, this is very different because you guys, in many respects, were an incubator, were you not?
It's so different in terms of our capabilities. It reflects our boldness. I think as we've always been willing to break the mold and try something new. So medicine was in my original vision for TCS Education System circa 2009. And so I'm a clinical psychologist by education. I'm not a physician, but I feel like I know more about how you launch a medical school than maybe anybody at this point. And in 2018, having spent about 9 years trying to find a medical school or university with one to join us, I turned to my senior team and I said, we have to get one in our system. If we can't find one, we create one from scratch. And so I tasked my team, in particular, our chief operating officer, Deborah Marcos, led the project, and she and I went all over the United States. And we went down some rabbit holes, and we had some great meetings. We went to different communities. What do you think about a brand new medical school? Is there a hospital? Went to a small town in Texas. University wanted to, have a medical school on campus, but the hospital in town had no interest. There's a lot of moving parts. Through that methodology, it really came down to two locations. One in the southeast, where the community was gung-ho. There was a university that said, we can't build one ourselves. We'd love to host one. And then a common consultant introduced us to the nascent Kansas Health Science Center. So it was about as nascent as any college or university can be. It was basically 3 board members and a consultant, and they'd filed some minimal paperwork with the state and with the osteopathic accrediting body. And to our mutual good fortune, the common consultant said, you guys need to talk to each other, because my perspective is, folks in Wichita, amazing idea. The community loves the idea you've been talking about for years. You're not going to be able to stand this thing up without TCS. And TCS, you're always looking for community impact. You're going to blow the roof off of Wichita, because they really need it. They want it. Everyone is aligned to support it. So we've started campuses before. As I said, we educate in 50 states. We've started campuses in other cities. We've launched new programs. This is a version of that, but the scale and size and resources, in that sense, it's a new level up for us.
Well, what struck me with that, Michael, is really 2 things. One, that area of the country, there's a shortage of rural healthcare providers. So you're fulfilling that need, but also, and perhaps more importantly, there was strong community support for what you had. And I don't know of too many schools who are successful who don't have that community support, especially a startup.
That the community impact is built into the DNA of our organization. So we literally talk about 2 things as foremost: student success, community impact. So each one of our institutions are on that. And so when we were interviewing colleges and communities, we wanted to assess that support. And it came down to one very tangible and powerful example that really turned the tide toward Wichita. There's a wonderful foundation in Wichita called the Riverside Health Foundation, and they've been supporting medical education for years. And this nascent KHSC had approached them, and they said, yeah, we'll give $15 million toward the launch of a medical school, and we've looked at what you're doing so far, and we're not convinced, so we're not putting the money up. We were then introduced to that foundation, and they said, okay, now we're rocking. Let's do a 3-way agreement with the existing KHSC, with TCS. If we get that going, we're going to sign on the dotted line. I'm proud to tell you that $15 million is in the bank. It's the biggest donation any of our colleges have ever received. That's something I'd like to duplicate, triplicate, on and on. And it shifts my thinking when we say talking to communities can also be talking to different groups that are interested in supporting a particular kind of institution or activity. So again, not brand new to our wheelhouse, but it's certainly expanded our wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. And hence the birth of KCOM, your Kansas College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Exactly. KCOM is the first program or college of the larger institution, the Kansas Health Science Center. A simple way to think about it is Kansas Health Science Center is the university, which at the moment only has one college, and that's the Kansas College of Osteopathic Medicine. I want to build on what you said about rural healthcare. Kansas is 40th in the country in physician access and shortage. Rural healthcare is supremely undersupplied throughout this country. And it's another very powerful example of, as I crisscross the country, I heard from other medical schools that say, hey, wait a minute, we got enough medical schools. We don't need this. And that's always the case in higher ed. I'm used to that. It's like they think everyone was needed till they crossed the threshold, and then it's like, that's enough. We don't need any more. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. We literally are relying on importing physicians from other countries, and the United States has the greatest capacity in the world to educate physicians and other healthcare professionals. Then I'd get the second level of objection. Well, there's not enough training slots. But I'd been through that song and dance with psychology, because as the Chicago School has grown to the biggest mental health educator in the country, that's what I heard. We're not going to be enough practicum sites, not enough internships. I'm like, hey, let's get together and create more. And at one point, we had worked to create so much more. There was a surplus of psychology training. But I will tell you, we have unprecedented support throughout the state of Kansas. I believe that every one of our students, if they choose to, will be able to get all of their training in the first 4 years of medicine in the state. We'll likely have some out of state as some options, but we have exceeded, what we needed to present to the accreditor for training sites. So the support is statewide, and it's another point of pride for KCOM and KHSC. They've done a remarkable job of going throughout the state. We have a very connected group of board of trustees, ranging from, very prominent physicians in the city of Wichita to the CEO of a rural hospital, and that's going great guns.
That is fabulous. Now, one of the things that really attracted me to having you back on the show was how you're using technology in this. Rural medicine is becoming more and more technology dependent. Doctors can't always travel 200, 300, 400 miles to get to their patients. You're using some of the same kind of technology to train the physicians.
That is going to be so powerful, Drumm. We are redefining doctor, redefining physician. It's really this powerful blend of embracing technology full on. And I had a great conversation with our primary care chair, Dr. Ava Stanzik, this morning. She's a pediatrician. We still have to teach medical students to touch patients and look them in the eye and be related. So it's not either that or technology, it's both and that's a very powerful ethic within osteopathic medicine, embracing that relationship, that primary care relationship, and advancing technology. Think about it. So many visits, especially during COVID, people are looking at their phone and talking to their doctor. So this is the first generation of physicians that's going to be trained with telemedicine, perhaps as the majority of visits. We'll see what happens. But to your point about rural healthcare, when I was crisscrossing the country with Deborah Marcos, we went up to Marion, Kansas, and visited that now board member. And he had one physician in this hospital full time. So number one, you see that side of that physician has to know how to deal with physical trauma, deliver babies, know about substance abuse, and the specialists are basically through telemedicine. So here's a small hospital, but they have to have the equipment to talk to Colorado or bigger cities in Kansas, wherever it is. And otherwise, that specialist may never show up. And the technology is getting better and better. Our faculty and at TCS, we do have an integrated technology team, meaning even the technology professionals at the college are part of our national team and under the leadership of our CIO. So they've been deeply involved visiting Silicon Valley. There's a partnership with a institute that's connected to the Disney folks in California that involves AI. And we're going to be one of the first schools to not have cadaver lab. And students will learn about the inside of a body and anatomy and biology by using technology. I think we're going to see this advance light years. We have an assistant dean that's just focused on academic innovation. And he's told us, I mean, the pace of renewal of knowledge is at warp speed now. I think we see it throughout education, but if you look at medicine, it's stunning. So our team of medical leaders is committed to keeping up with this. And at the same time, you got to hold it in tension, knowing that some of those folks may be the only physician in a community. So they're also going to have to know how to comfort grieving people and do house calls. And I think it's phenomenal. I love that slogan they've chosen of redefining doctor.
I think that is fabulous. So these technologies, there's a broader implication across higher ed for these use, isn't there?
Absolutely. Well, number one, we have a lot of programs in healthcare. We're the biggest educator in mental and behavioral health, full stop. 3 of our colleges educate in those programs. We have a law school that's doing a hybrid JD. And so faculty and students mastering the use of technology for simulation, for parsing out what's best learned through technology and self-paced versus the select set of skills that have to be done in person. Everything we're going to learn for the medical school will directly apply, for example, to our nursing curricula and likely to many of our psychology and behavioral health folks. You know, these experiments have been ongoing for a few years. There are AI and simulation, for example, of mental health patients. And there's also simulation now of AI as the therapist. And people are shocked to hear there's some basic interviewing that an AI simulator can do as well as a person, because it's I don't know if we should laugh or cry or both, because you and I have a certain generation, but so we need to keep assessing what can the machine do better or enhance what's the human being uniquely there to do.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I was on a conference call yesterday with someone who heads up Microsoft's AI department. And of course, that's huge. And I asked the question, when can we expect autonomous vehicles? And she thought about it for a second. She said, 3 years, 3 years. Now, she talked about it from the perspective of trucking and, out on the freeways, which is far less complex than what you would have in city driving and other than that. But she said 3 years. And I can see what you're talking about as well. It's changing the whole focus of how education can be delivered. For instance, you can put people into scenarios, whether it be, no cadavers. And of course, I have the smart aleck question: how do physicians deal with the smell if there's no cadavers? But that's a different story.
I've an interest. I attended a medical technology conference, and I asked the physicians there, and they said, you know what? From our point of view, cadavers, number one, don't have the same feel and sense that an actual human body does. So you're still never going to replace the fact that that whole notion of touching and perhaps cutting into a human body, it's not the same as a living person versus a cadaver. The second point this person made to me, and she was a surgeon, she said, most doctors are never going to cut a human body. They're just not. They're going to work with teams. They have to know emotional intelligence. Most of their work is not going to be about cutting in to bodies. There will be, a subgroup, but they're going to learn it through doing. So you're right about that. Rest assured, our students will have plenty of exposure, to the clinical setting. I'll make an interesting point that our dean made to me. He said medical education hasn't changed much in 100 years. So it's 4 years of medical school. 100 years ago, you went to school for 4 years, and then you went out and practiced medicine. He said what people forget now is now you go to school for 4 years so you can start 3, 4, 5, 6 years of residency, fellowship, postdoc. So he said the whole ecosystem has evolved. There's going to be plenty of education after we hand that first medical student their degree. And believe me, they'll meet plenty of real live patients.
No doubt. And so this has huge implications for medical schools. It has huge implications for psychology, but it also has implications for business schools as well, in the way that we're teaching.
Yeah, I think your analogy to the self-driving car is good. We're going to try to double down on the issue of retention and completion, which is fairly strong already, and higher ed needs to do more. And in some institutions, it's a real problem. The use of AI to understand what are the success factors for learning, for completing a program is going to be really important. And in my mind, it's no different than medicine. We can get all the Google and Microsoft stuff that we want, and there's still going to have to be people that intervene based on that knowledge. So it's never going to be technology has created a solution. Now we're just going to march in that direction. People have to define the problem, train people, talk to the technology people developing it. And it's part of what I love about our integrated system, because our CIO is in the mix with our presidents and our chief academic officers and our chief operating officer. So it absolutely has a profound impact for any of the fields, as well as helping us understand how to get more students to success. You're absolutely right about business in particular, because a lot of business is predicting consumer behavior and customer behavior, and we want future MBA students, and we have those programs as well, to be able to embrace and use that technology. Our law school is out the gate in developing micro-credentials and coursework that blend the practice of law and technology. That's been profoundly changed. That field has been changed by technology as well.
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about the technology, and this is just me personally, is its ability to improve persistence and graduation rates. Through AI, you can figure out where is the block that the student is having, and then give him or her what they need to be able to overcome that block, to quote, learn what they need to learn so that they can continue with their program. I mean, you can apply this in business school, law school, whatever school it is.
In all of it, you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of research, and higher ed hasn't found the magic bullet yet. There's a lot of well-intended institutions, including ours, trying to crack, this problem. In some cases, it's academic. In some cases, there's students with life issues, and someone needs to reach out and just listen. How can we support you? How can we create a payment plan? What can we do to help with childcare so you can come to class? And I think you're absolutely right that AI has the potential to hone in on those issues, potentially even to help us understand even before matriculation.
We can certainly hope so. So, Michael, unfortunately we're getting close to the end of our time. You have 3 takeaways for university presidents about the innovation, the technology, and what you guys have done with KHSC.
I absolutely do.
I kind of figured you might.
Yeah. Higher education, if you're a president, figure out how to drive radical cooperation and collaboration within your institution and with other institutions. Nothing bad will happen to you. There's just a heavy culture of competition that isn't serving the sector well. Go and talk to your community. There's a lot of discussion about town-gown relationships. Really figure out what you can offer to your community and what your community can offer to the college. However you define your community, it may be geographic, it may be disciplinary, and focus on growth and evolution in your institution. I understand that there's a lot of tradition and history in higher ed. There are also a lot of conventions that at this point just have to be broken. As a broad field, we're lagging on the pace of change.
Yeah, one of my recent guests said one of the smartest thing that he ever did as a university president was hiring a CFO from outside of higher ed.
That's it. Our general counsel, we talked. She was on her way to a breakfast meeting with the general counsel of Crate and Barrel. I'm like, that is great, because where you need to get these new ideas and insights. And so we are always pushing our folks out into the community, make connections. Your ideas can come from anywhere sound.
So we used to have a saying in the Navy, it's 265 years of tradition unhampered by progress. And higher ed, I think it goes back even further than that.
Well, yeah, for sure. And that's a pretty good saying to put on it.
And so what's next for you guys at TCS, Michael?
You're going to see all of our institutions continue to grow. Our platform, as it were, of 5 colleges and all these programs are broad enough that we can now look at launching new colleges, new programs within our current milieu. In fact, Saybrook University is looking at growing into the field of art and design. The Chicago School of Professional Psychology is looking to broaden in nursing and related healthcare fields. Pacific Oaks is working on a doctoral degree. It'll be their first one. And you're going to see new healthcare programs at KHSC and joint degrees, because you're going to see our medical students in those Saybrook MBA programs and Chicago School MPH. And we'll continue to talk to any institution that wants to explore joining our model. We have a current active discussion with one. Some smaller institutions are talking to our colleges about merging into them. So the space is active. I'm glad to see that. I would hope that more institutions come from a position of strength to seek cooperation and growth rather than when they're at death's door.
And that is, if you're thinking about any kind of merger, whatever, that is the most critical thing. Do it when you're healthy instead of when you're on hospice.
Perfect.
To use a medical analogy.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better.
So, Michael, great to have you back on the show. Thank you so much, and let's stay in touch and keep an eye on what you guys are doing, because you're certainly making new paths.
Thanks for having me back, Drumm, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening this week. And a special thank you to this week's special guest, Dr. Michael Horowitz, CEO of TCS Education System, and for his sharing with us how TCS is ushering in new technologies that can revolutionize how higher education delivers its education to the next generation of doctors and students. Our next guest is Jim Bose, VP of Enrollment Management at the University of Oregon and former board chair for ACRO. Jim's been at the forefront of the development and changes in enrollment management, and he'll be joining us to talk about how enrollment has changed and is changing in the COVID and the enrollment cliff eras, and what institutions need to grow or stabilize their enrollment.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.